Hello and welcome to a look at my latest free maps collection, Mike's Free Maps collection number 24, followed by a very concise look at the programs I use to create these maps, Inkarnate and Campaign Cartographer Plus version 3. So these free maps, as you might gather from the cover, a lot of desert stuff. I'm working on the Consortium series of adventures, and the fifth adventure in the series is set in the desert. And like all my map collections, there's a PDF with images of the maps in PDF format. It's kind of like you can look through it. You could export from the PDF or copy paste, I believe. I didn't lock this in any way. But there's also two folders, one with all the JPEGs with the grid on there, and also the same maps without the grid. And those are useful in virtual tabletops such as Roll20 or what I use, Fantasy Grounds Unity. And of course, you could, if you wanted to, with the ungridded one, you could regrid it yourself. And so there's some forests from earlier adventures in the C series, such as this one is the dungeon under Hulblin Hill, and then the desert stuff, and more desert stuff, and then deserts, and then some of the dungeons. So I guess I should say spoilers if you're a player and your DM is running some of these adventures. So quick, very quick look at the programs I use. I've been making D&D maps since I started playing D&D, and back in the ancient days of the game, it was graph paper, usually purchased at the university bookstore. I used to bike there back when I was in high school, buy some graph paper. They sold D&D stuff there too, like bookstores sometimes do. And I would do the maps with pencils, and I upgraded to color pencils. And then, of course, eventually, when computer programs became like accessible, I used like Mac Paint, Mac Draw, Freehand eventually, and then Adobe Illustrator. And then they started making dedicated mapping programs such as Campaign Cartographer and Inkarnate. So I like both of these programs, both Inkarnate and Campaign Cartographer. So if you're looking to do some D&D cartography, I'd recommend both of them. So for Inkarnate, this is a subscription-based program. It runs through the web. It's browser-based, which can be good in the sense you can do Inkarnate anywhere you have web access. The downside, of course, is anywhere you don't have web access, you can't do Inkarnate. But these days, at least in most areas, people have reliable broadband access. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you've clearly got some type of access. But if you're someplace where the connection is kind of spotty, like many parts of rural America, there's no broadband connection like many parts of America, then this would not be like your best choice because you'd be stuck, trying to do the maps with a bad connection. Now, the cost of this is they have a free version. It's $25 per year subscription or $5 per month. So if you're going to do it for a while, the 25 is the good choice. You can also, of course, the free version you can use as well. So they do, in terms of like what you get, they do pretty regular updates. They add in new symbols, they add in new map types, new features, and in my experience, because I create these maps, it's a good deal because you're getting these regular updates. So instead of like buying new versions of the program, you're paying currently $25 a year. I did the year subscription and getting upgrades. I pay for it myself. This is no sponsorship. They're not giving me any money for this. It's a program I use and I like, and so I recommend it. Now, its strong points are it's got multitudes of symbols, lots and lots of symbols, and multiple map types. So if you go want to create a new map, you can do a fantasy battle map, use a lot of these. They have world maps, cities in watercolor style. They even have sci-fi battle maps and watercolor style and parchment world. So you can pick your style and pick your size. Now going back to my own maps, as you can see I've got a lot of maps. When you want to create stuff, or work on something, go to your map. Another downside of being on the web is you're linked to your connection speed. I've got high-speed internet, but of course it's American high-speed internet is not super fast. And this is the map I created it's a desert scene. Now, the strong feature, one of the strongest features that I like about Inkarnate is it's essentially like a paint program. It does have symbol sets, so you can go in and have these various symbols of all lots. As I said, there's lots and lots and lots of symbols, and they're, as you can see, they're beautiful, they're well drawn, there are a huge variety of them. You can use symbols across all the different map types. So if you find something you want, and it's for like for like a area map, you can still use that. And you can import your own symbols, make up your own to include, which is useful as well if you need something custom. Or you can import like a graphic image and use that as your base, and then modify it like you would with any kind of drawing program. So really good collection of symbols. And the thing I use it for primarily is like kind of like a paint approach. Now this incredibly oversimplifies things, but in terms of when I use Inkarnate, because I have Inkarnate and Campaign Cartographer, kind of my distinction is Inkarnate's for the maps that back in the ancient days that I would freehand draw. So like, for example, like desert terrain, would freehand draw that out. And you can do, some pretty good stuff. Like it has supports, different levels of transparency. You can apply various blend modes to it. And so it's a pretty good drawing program, except of course, instead of being aimed at just like general drawing, it has, terrains that you can use. It has a good collection, excellent collection of symbols. They've added recently, one thing that was a complaint about the program was if you're trying to make like dungeons with lots of straight walls and buildings, etc., you'd have to just like keep doing these symbols and just kind of like using a stamp, trying to stamp the darn things on there. But they've added kind of experimentally, but it's beta, but it works very well, is a line tool. So you can draw stuff like this. And you could do like a dungeon with lots of lines. It can do that. But in terms of like how I use this, if I'm doing a map where I'd be, again, kind of like freehanding it, and that's my approach. And I don't want to sell Inkarnate short. You can do, as you can see, you can do, straight lines, etc. And I've done a few dungeons because I wanted, I did like a sewer because I wanted it to look really, really gross. And Inkarnate's got a good collection of symbols and terrains, so you can make some pretty sticky, yucky sewers. So I guess from the standpoint of like doing nasty dungeons, super good. So I'd recommend Inkarnate if you're going to create maps. It's really good, and you can put on a grid if you want, or not have your grid if you don't want a grid. And you can do both. They store your maps on their server, which is, you could also look at it as, hey, you're paying $25 and you get some storage for your maps. And of course, you can also save them locally, and you can obviously export them. So Inkarnate, really good. Like, if you're going to do maps, I'd recommend adding this to your toolkit. Again, no sponsorship, no free copy of Inkarnate. I pay for it, and so I recommend it based on my own spending of money. Now, my other program that I use is Campaign Cartographer. This one is a fairly venerable program. It runs off a CAD, a computer-assisted design program. And as you can see, it's got lots of tools and lots of stuff. And this is a map of a dungeon from my upcoming C5 desert moon dungeon. And I went with the kind of the black and white style because the kind of the gimmick for this dungeon is that it's magical and it only solidifies up in the sky when the moon is shining upon it. And I wanted to create kind of like a kind of ghostly look to it. And kind of this gray look works well. The program, of course, can create stuff in full living color. Now, Campaign Cartographer is a program you buy. The base program is about $45. You can often find it on Humble Bundle, really good prices on Humble Bundle. I've bought it a few times because I like to support the company. They're active on Facebook. you can go there, you can ask them. It's like the kind of like the old days of gaming when gaming companies were very personal. You could send them a letter back when people wrote letters and they would reply back. They were very much they were gamers who ran a gaming company or software company, rather than kind of the approach today, which is a big company trying to make squeeze all the money out of us, with game designers as their kind of often they're exploited employees. But enough of that that politics. So 45 for base. Company seems really nice. You can go on Facebook, ask them questions. They'll respond, and they know what they're doing. They use their programs. They create them and use them, etc. It has a bunch of add-ons. So the base program gets you the base, and you can do stuff with it. It's mostly for overland maps, but I'd recommend, if you're serious about mapping, is adding on the add-ons, and they're about $40 each. There's a dungeon designer, which adds lots of tools for dungeons, and I use the dungeon designer to create this. There's also a city designer, which adds lots of tools and functions and templates and symbols for cities. Recommend. There's also other expansions as well for it, and I recommend those if you're going to do like lots of mapping. They're also, so in the add-ons, again, about $40. There's also symbol sets. I like all of them. My favorite is probably symbol set 4, which is done by the famous cartographer, the famous Mike cartographer, Mike Schley, whose name I'm probably mispronouncing. Sorry, fellow Mike, for mispronouncing your last name. Happens to me all the time too. And really good symbols. The map is done in this style in the black and white version. Really good. If you're only going to buy one symbol set for dungeons, I'd recommend symbol set 4. He also created a symbol set 5 for cities in his style. If you play Dungeons and Dragons, you've seen his maps. They're in the books. They're really good mapping. There's also an annual that you can subscribe to, but it's a good kind of subscription where you essentially pay ahead of time. So each month you get a new kind of like expansion. It'll typically be new drawing tools, new symbols, etc., adding new features to the program. So you may not be exactly what you want, because it's for all. It could be like, for example, if you don't play Call of Cthulhu, in 1 month it's a Cthulhu big mapping kind of add-on. You may not find that useful. Or if you are running Cthulhu and the expansion, the annual is about dungeons or like new starship deck plans, might not be useful to you. But they're all good, and they all add to the program. So I subscribe every year to help support the company, because I think they're a good company, good product, etc. But also it's good stuff. I love getting all those extra symbols. Now, downside: steep learning curve. This is a serious program, and you can do all kinds of stuff with it. Incredible things. It even has like a command line if you really want to get into, being very exact and doing all these things. So it's incredibly complex. It's on kind of the order of programs like Illustrator or Photoshop, in that you can go in there and just do stuff, but if you really want to get into all that it can do, it's got a very steep learning curve. But more time, much more skill, better maps. It'll be rewarding. So it's not in the sense that like if you get it, you'll just be incapable of using it. It's that you will need to like spend a lot of time working with it to get good, as people say in gaming. There's a Tomb of Mapping that's about, I think, around 800 pages. We read it recently. That's worth getting too. It goes through a lot of ideas about how to use this and get the most out of it. There's very good support in the forums. There's a Facebook group. The people who use it, generally quite friendly. They're happy to help you out on your journey to mapping. Now, one of the ways I recommend this to people, and again, I pay for this myself. I'm not sponsored. I like the company because they make good programs. They seem my interactions have all been very positive with the people at this company. So one of the powers of this, you can map anything from like a single room to literally an entire galaxy, because it's got stuff. It's got Cosmographer, where it does support all that, the sci-fi stuff. It's heavily focused on fantasy, overland fantasy maps, dungeons, etc. But it does have incredibly rich tools for mapping modern settings. If you wanted to do like a modern political map, it can do it. If you wanted to do like a modern style city map, it can do it. If you want to do like a traveler style starship deck plans, it can do it. When you just traveler sectors, do that. Galaxy, do that. It can do all that stuff. It's an incredibly powerful program. And it has a huge variety of map types. So I've got pretty much everything from it, but if you create a new map and save my changes, there's all these different types. They got castles, characters, cities. Cosmographer is a sci-fi one. You can create dioramas with it for real. You can print it up. It'll guide you through creating things you can print on paper, cardstock, cut them out, make your own dungeons. Of course, it's got dungeons, floor plans, fractal terrains, lots of other stuff, overland maps. You can do perspectives. That creates kind of the if you play games like Diablo 1, 2, or 3, they're isometric maps. That's pretty cool. There's symbol catalogs, there's the temples things, and there's also a tokens treasury. And all of these have lots of maps, types of them. So this is just the broad categories. If you go, for example, into the Cosmographer, you have all kinds of different types. You can do deck plans, starships, galaxies, more starships, space maps, more starships. Then I said that even one thing I like is, one of the many things I like is, having played Traveler, original Traveler back in the day, you can recreate that classic Traveler look. So this is just the sci-fi stuff. And for the dungeons, most people probably come for the dungeons. It also has, lots of different map types. Some of the annuals, the castles one is very very interesting because you can create that cool looking 3D castle effect. And then it has, various battle map types, all kinds of different, lots and lots of different dungeons. This one's pretty cool. This could be a good one for illustrating like a book or for playing. Doesn't probably translate well to like a tabletop map, but it looks cool. So lots and lots of stuff. Lots of maps, tons of symbols, tons of tools, incredibly powerful. I've been using this for years and years, and I'm still just learning like all that it can do. Now, in terms of sort of like my psychological approach to this, even though it can create like any map, you could do anything with this. And if someone said to me, you may only have one mapping program, I would say Campaign Cartographer, if I can only have just one. Fortunately, I don't have to have just one. I also like Inkarnate. Now, my kind of psychological approach, like when I'm going to do a map with Inkarnate, it's like, well, what would I do if I was going to like freehand a map, just like draw it out? With Campaign Cartographer, it's my go-to for things I would do with a pencil and a ruler back in the day. So dungeons, where there's lots of straight lines, etc. Again, I don't want to sell Campaign Cartographer short. You can do anything with that. You can create, they even have like a watercolor, add on to it that I've got, where you can create your maps and then make them look like they're a watercolor, look like it's been hand drawn out, and it can do all that stuff. But again, it's kind of like my mental approach is, if I want to do maps that I would have done with like ruler, or like a compass, or my drawing templates back in the day, then I would break out Campaign Cartographer to create those maps. It's my go-to for dungeons like this. But it's good for anything. So both these programs, really good. They do what they do extremely well. Campaign Cartographer can do vastly more, but it's been around longer, and it's a full program. And so thanks. Stay safe. I'll see you in the future. Phone call.